I don't know how to pronounce it. Pardon? No, the smart end notes.
Yes.
You looked at Julian's response, or just reviewed it yourself?
I just reviewed it myself.
You need to look at Julian's response, but we can do that.
Okay.
Um,
I've seen the book.
You want to sit to that, that's fine. You want to sit in English, fine. We're all the same. I don't know if anybody's going to be here. But we do need to make it a working. We have 17 drafts to get to the ISG in 4 months. Come on, well, that was obviously not what he wanted. First time I've had Diet Coke bottles. Have you done anything fun while you're here?
Not a lot. Last week I was on a cruise with Greece.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I stayed there, so I really got here Sunday afternoon, so I haven't had a lot of free time here this time. But today I'm free, and I can fly out till tomorrow, so I will get to see a little bit, you know. I've been here several times now, so.
Yes, yes. I had never, I know the IETF social did the cruise trip, but I didn't get a ticket. My own fault, not anyone else's. The table seems congested.
The room.
And it's a large room. It really doesn't seem like it's necessary to have it for close to the front.
Yeah, whatever.
Like one less row, but we probably.
They had from, in order to get maximum flexibility, have you ever listened to, yes you did, you listened to an ISG scheduling call.
Yeah.
You know all the debates. You don't need me to tell you how the debates go, Margaret.
Yeah,
You've done it, I've only observed it.
yeah, I did it for 3 years. Because I did Harry Normark's last year, and then I did another 2 years.
So you know the debates. So by stuffing it, these rooms become a bigger opening for some of the meetings. And once they give the, once they give the room size, even though it might not need it all for us or some other group, they will set the room size and keep it. Okay, am I projecting? Yes. Doesn't matter. Okay, so one of us takes notes and one of us projects, and that's fine. Pardon? Okay, then I have the notes. Darn, that's what we want to get to. Ha, you're too smart for me. Okay, I'll get you. Did you download the program? I mean, that's, I can project it to mine as well. So I have it. You should have those. Connector? Oh, because it's stretching on its,
It's not the heater.
huh. Well, it seems like you got it as far as there, and get tools up to the rest. Maybe the resolution will protect it. If it doesn't, if it causes you problems, I'll take it back. Okay. Let's see. So we have, that's interesting. Okay. So is there any need to talk about our optimization today? That's right. And I think we're basically rolling through the graphs. 17, I think I found that we have to make sure we push through the review. So like, that's where I say, hi, you know, please. And we should get done through all of it. Oh, am I talking in the middle of the box yet, though? Yours, Margaret, is the big one. The IQ, the Ventus's review was awesome, but wow. Yeah. Aaliyah, side note, got the tickets reserved.
Cool. Since, I'm not sure who's going to be driving.
That's fine. It doesn't sound like there's a problem adding. I just made sure we got the ones you wanted. So. Okay, you want me to start with this? I love this screen. It's like totally fuzzed.
Well, I commanded it to display it with max resolution, so it's, you point, but it's not higher resolution.
That's fine. It's fine. It's just, you know, all the other screens have been better than this room.
It's nice to have that there.
Yeah. Welcome, Trill. Oh, you're in the right place, Trill?
Yeah.
Good, good. I don't know your name, so I'm Sue. Pardon? Ignacio and Dirk. Good, Ignacio. You're welcome to sit up front, you're welcome to sit in back, but this is a discussion. So, you can do whatever you want. I'm very flexible. We should go back to the note well. Yeah, that's good. Okay. This is a note well. This is a new note well, just in case you didn't know. So you should read it. There is more included. And I think that's the best thing I can say. We've got it in the notes. Anyone who want to ask any questions about it, we'll just go in. Good thing, Lee, I'm glad you're here. Donald sent a message to the list. You should look at it because we'll come back to you. Okay, so after the Trill note, well, go ahead. Okay, 17, we are trying to get everybody's documents through Trill in the next 6 months. So I need your help. We're going to ask for reviews. Donald will help me, and John and I will ask for reviews. So if you'd like your documents to go through, help everybody else's. Please. It's going to take time. Do you want to say something, Aaliyah?
Yeah, Aaliyah, yeah, so one thing I'd say is reviews really help, and also being extremely proactive as authors. Usually when I do an AD review, if you reply back and get it fixed up really quickly, I can schedule it, have it last call, and on the telechat, ISG telechat is planned. If you're not responsive, it can take a lot longer, and we're trying to get these things all done while I'm still AD. Thank you.
Okay, the other thing is, as Feng Wei experienced, you must read the new reviewers, like the ARP optimization. We fixed one set of reviewers, then we got a new set because we got a new ISG. You have to read the reviewers and you have to answer them. If you have problems, Donald and I will help you write text. It's a group thing, right? You know, if you need help, ask. Mostly what we're doing is I'm sending you to Donald for rewrite because I usually am doing the reviews along with John. So if I tell you that, I'll give you my own review, but
Donald has graciously offered to help with rewrites, and you've experienced that before. You're going to have to help us with the review and last call. When I do the last call, there'll be questions so that we indicate it, that there's interest. Okay, so let's go through the documents we're going to work on. There is, excuse me for my phone being loud. I use it to wake me up in the morning, and this morning it needed to be very loud. So we've gotten, thanks to Aaliyah and Donald and all your review, we got 2 RFCs through. We've got 1 in RFCQ, but now we're going to talk about the draft ARP optimization and the draft MTU, because some things come back to us for review. Go ahead. Then there are some, there's a draft in publication, but needs change because Aaliyah's got some really good comments. Now we have drafts past the working group last call, but we had significant comments late. Now there's a good reason for this, and that Aaliyah corrected, I think is a politically correct way, the review process in the routing area. Trill usually gets at least a routing QA review. It gets an operations review and may get a security review. We weren't getting them quickly. Trill over IP got a transport review. If these reviews get behind, and that's my job, is to press the button and Donald and I will track it, it will happen what happened with Trill over IP, Trill P2MP, BFD, and resilient trios. If we get the comments late, then we have to resolve it late, and you're sort of like, where was this draft? So we're going to try to really increase the cycle time by taking the input and then trying to track you down to get the response. Again, we've got 17 drafts to get through the ISG. Yes, they'll love us after a while. So Trill over IP we're going to discuss. We don't have it on the agenda, but Fengwei, if we get a chance, we're going to talk about smart endnodes. Okay. Trill ARP is on the agenda. We don't have Trill P2MP on the agenda, do we?
No, I think that it's really in the right up stage.
Okay, I think we're good on that one. And I think Trill on the resilient trees is fine. Yep, we're both good on that. Donald and I are trying to help that. Go ahead to the next status. That's it? Okay, we're in working group last call. And we've left the working group last call to have a discussion on the changes, Fengwei. The ECN support, I haven't seen any problems with, and the directory assisted in caps, we got some private reviews that we'll call it. So we're going to leave those in reviews to see if we can clean it up rapidly. If not, and you don't fix it rapidly, then we've got to stop and do another 2-week last call. I really want to try to keep pushing it. We have 2 calls for adoption that we talked about last time, which is the group keying and the RT parent selection. Now, for Donald as the main author and for Rakesh, is that? Yeah, Rakesh, good. If you go by Rakesh or Kumar? Ram Kumar. Okay, I'm sorry. I should have said Ram instead of Rakesh. My apologies. Ram Kumar, when we get this adopted, this has to go fast through the process because it's just being adopted. Donald already got warned. So what you're going to get is you're going to get an immediate set of QA reviews once we adopt it. As far as I can tell, this one's good for adoption. But just to warn everybody, as a chair, I'm pulling this in. I'm warning everybody. We're on the last 6 months of all these documents. We're trying to get all the documents through because a lot of our work is through and into product, and then we're trying to wrap up all the documentation. Again, the reason why we have all this backload is we weren't getting QA reviews. Now, thanks to Aaliyah, we fixed that process. I'm going to depend on you to help me get it through. Okay, next. All of these other drafts, you noticed Edersfush got Rev DCI, We need to know if there's a real usage for DCI or whether it's going away. If it's, some of the guys said the use case and the need might be going away. Again, some of these use cases come out of India, and some of their networks are changing. The topology, the single level and unique multi-level nicknames. Now, folks, on those ones, Mingwei and Izao, these two, you may be receiving on the single and unique some comments from Donald. Donald and I met early this week and walked through all the documents. Please pay attention when we go through the revision, because we'll do one more revision and do working group last call. I don't think there's much technically, but Donald and I thought the drafts needed a little bit of fixing.
I'm gonna be guys out there. I think it's quite fair to talk about what the utilities.
Yep. So that one we're probably just going to drop one off the list, Aaliyah. Trill, Yang, OEM, I have a lot to say on, so I'll put that on, but we're caught there between the revised data stores. Mingwei, Isa, do you know if the Trill Yang is been implemented in Huawei? I talked to Deepak about Cisco. Are these implemented? The reason is due to the Yang debate, we've got the revised data store. Anything that I do, I'm having to do like I did with the BGP stuff. I have to, if it's out there, I need to publish what's there, and then I need to move at the same time to the revised data store. That's why I need to know if somebody's got it out there. I will put the revised draft out. With the BGP MIB with the BGP Yang model, there were 15 people, and I know that Cisco has the Yang and the OEM, and so I'm tending to put it out there, but I just need to know if there's more than one. Okay, so you don't have to answer on list unless you.
I'm not the Yang people, but I'd like to go back and check whether.
If you would do that, that would be very helpful. And I'll check with Cisco to see if they're still deploying.
Deepak is the main author of this Yang OEM. Who is the main author? Deepak. Who is the main author of this Yang? Deepak's. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
Not the main author, I just need to know if it's deployed, because if it's not deployed, we just move to the revised data store version.
Okay.
It's just different. I think that may save us time in the end. Okay. Go ahead, Donald, to the next one. Okay, those are all the rest of our drafts. There's RCs. Thank you, Donald. Yeah, so we've completed the milestones, and we're doing well on that. Let's go to the next one. We have overdue ones, but again, those are based on the reviews that we didn't get until late. So we're going to try to focus on Trill over IP. We're going to try to focus on multi-level, and the R-bridge stuff. So I think we've got drafts for everything, and we'll go from there. Okay. Donald, who's next? Did you pull up the agenda?
We have Ramkumar as the first person that we like to speak with.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Ram Kumar Brookin. I don't have anything to present. I just wanted to ask if the draft is ready and we can advance it.
I'm having a terrible amount of noise. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if the draft, the parent selection draft is ready and we can advance it as adopt it in the working group.
I think we're good to go.
Okay. Okay.
The only reason I wanted to talk about in the working group is to let everybody know it's got a fast turn,
Okay.
and we're good.
Okay.
Okay. Now comes our real substantive. Margaret, if you'd help us go through this.
So I'm going to talk about Trill over IP next. We'll do a very brief. Is there anybody here who hasn't already seen the presentation on what Trill over IP is about? Anybody has not seen that presentation already? All right, we will go through it quickly, but I think a lot of people already know that. Then we'll talk about where we are on it and what all the outstanding issues are with the document right now. Next. So the point of Trill over IP is to treat an IP network as a link connecting Trill switch ports, thus providing a method to connect Trill sites into a single Trill campus. There's two scenarios described in the draft. One of them is the remote office scenario. That would be I have a big Trill site. I have a remote office that runs Trill, and I use Trill over IP to turn that all into one big Trill campus. There's also the IP backbone scenario, which is that say I have a Trill network on each floor of my building or in each building of a campus, and then I have a big IP backbone, and I run Trill over IP over that backbone to connect all those floors or buildings. The draft specifies the packet format and the security. It tries to cover transport considerations, but we'll find when we bring up the issues that we missed some of them. MTU, fat flows, quality of service, and middle boxes. Next. The existing draft specifies 3 formats for Trill, and it's extensible so that there can be more formats in the future if they're needed. This is trying to give us a sense of what they are on the wire. There's Trill encapsulated in UDP over the link. There's Trill encapsulated in Ethernet, in VXLAN in UDP over the link. And there's Trill encapsulated in TCP over the link. Those are the 3 formats that are defined. Next page.
Just for history, the reason we went to that is we have some initial deployment people give us feedback that they wanted to use.
Yeah, that allowed them to use existing hardware, I think, with Trill over IP. We started this we started this before October of 2011. That's when the first draft was posted. The first working group draft was in 2014. We passed working group last call in 2017, but we've gotten a bunch of comments, and there was a transport area directorate review on June 15th of 2017. If you wanted to see the message, you can find it there, but we're going to bring up the issues during this presentation. So next slide. The current outstanding comments on the draft are about, and I'm going to go into each of these in more detail, but they're about zero checksum, explicit congestion notification, quality of service, the TCP transport that I mentioned, the third of those 3 formats, fragmentation, congestion control, and NAT. Okay, so next slide. In order to run at line speed and be efficient, people are going to want to run Trill over IP without IP header checksums. This is allowed now, even in IPv4 for RFC 6936, and it's allowed when there's going to be IP inside the tunnel, so you actually don't need the external checksum to find out if the correct end destinations, like the correct end destination was met. So we need to make the draft clearer about, and we mentioned it in the draft that we could use zero checksums, but we need to make it clearer about when Trill over IP meets the conditions for RFC 6936 and when it doesn't. That was the feedback. So we're going to make a change to make that clearer.
Do you see any problem making that change? Is it just textual change, editing change, or is it technical?
I mean, I guess it could be conceived of as a technical change if someone had turned off checksums in a case where they shouldn't have. But it's mostly a clarification because I don't think that people would probably have done that. Congestion control. The current draft has a good start on congestion control. It doesn't just ignore the topic, among other things. But there are a couple of things that we need to do. We need to look at what the effect is of using serial unicast instead of multicast on congestion. And what that is that normally you multicast, okay? And you multicast on a link and it goes everywhere. In some cases, when either the link doesn't support multicast or you have some other reason to do so, you serialize multicast. So you send a message to every one of the other Trill nodes on the link. That obviously is going to create more traffic, and we need to at least write text that explains the impact. And I suppose in doing that, we might find there's a problem, but I don't anticipate that. I just think we're going to this is about making the transport considerations text correct more than it is about the protocol itself. The other thing is that we always have a problem in the IETF with anything that tunnels. Trill over IP is effectively tunneling, right? We're tunneling Trill in IP. And whenever we tunnel things, we get the question, how do we know that the traffic inside the tunnel is congestion controlled? There's a rule in the IETF that anything that runs over IP needs to provide congestion control, okay? TCP provides congestion control. MPTCP provides congestion control. Quick provides congestion control. HTTP, because it's over TCP, does, but UDP does not. And applications running above UDP are required to provide it. Okay, like all the IETF applications running above UDP. There are two cases where we can run into traffic that isn't congestion controlled. Okay, that's UDP applications developed by someone else where they didn't bother to do congestion control, or non-IP traffic. And so this has come up in a lot of tunneling situations before. The question is, how can we tell if it is congestion controlled? And typically in the IETF, we've kind of waved our hands and said, well, if it's IP, it's all congestion controlled, even though we know that isn't entirely true, okay? And the answer is you can't necessarily tell. And I don't know, we'll have to figure out exactly what to say about this in the spec, right? Because you really can't tell if a UDP application you know nothing about has congestion control. I mean, you'd have to be like a mind reader. I mean, so it's unclear. I think we'll just have to say that's a risk or something. But right, but because we're tunneling, okay, if that's just on your local link, it's okay, right? Because, well, it's not okay, but you're going to figure it out, and you're going to be able to figure out what node is doing it, and you're going to be able to walk into their office. But when you start putting stuff in a tunnel and sending it across the internet, then you're possibly congesting the internet, not just your own office. And so it is, you know, a reasonable question to ask. I think if we look at the wording in the CapWAP draft, for instance, we had basically broken apart an access point, and you could put it across an internet. Right. It's control and provisioning of wireless access points, okay? And it breaks an AP into two parts and allows an IP tunnel between them. And we had to deal with the same issue. And I think we should go look at what the wording was in that draft and see if it's still considered sufficient. I don't know.
So that's something we'll have to talk to. We should probably work creatively with either Magnus, who I think was the person reviewing the CapWeb, and that's probably like pick it up as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we can creatively work with
Right.
Magnus, he seems.
Yeah, I mean, that issue originally came from Dave Borman in CapWAP, and it's a potential real issue, but it's unclear what the right thing is to do about it. So we'll have to figure that out.
Does everyone understand? Okay, if you have questions about that issue, we can stop and discuss it. Otherwise, we'll go on, because I think Margaret and the editing team knows.
Yeah, I mean, between vacations and stuff, we haven't resolved all these issues since June 15th, all right? So we're going to resolve them hopefully in the next, I don't know, month or so. Yeah.
I think this is gonna take, this may be our long haul, 10 suggestions. We need to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's unlikely that a spec change is going to come out of this, because it's not like we're going to suddenly divine a way to tell if the traffic is congestion controlled. So,
Yeah, Atlas. So this is one of the documents where we talked about a while ago, and it's not, sorry, we're doing it in the Trill working group because there's the expertise here, and because it will get the review, even though it's slightly out of charter, and that's fine. But And I would much prefer to see it done, but if it becomes necessary for it to be AD sponsored due to time constraints, that's an alternative. But please consider yourself to have the same degree of pressure of trying to finish in the next 6 months.
Well, I mean, we really want to finish, and most of these are, although in some cases they're going to require some working out, they're not really spec changes. They're like doing our homework, checking that things are that there is no real concern, and documenting that.
I understand.
Next slide. ECN. Trill over IP is a tunneling protocol, as I just said, and there's specific restrictions or rules, guidance, I don't know what you would call it, in RFC 6040 for what tunneling protocols are supposed to do with ECN. And I only found out about that like on June, I don't know, 18th or something when I read this mail. And it's a real thing. I mean, it's a fairly recent RFC. We say nothing about it. We need to actually say, and in this case, it is a spec change because we need to do what RFC 6040 says we're supposed to do. It's a little trickier than just following RFC 6040, so I'll explain the plan such as it is. So a Trill over IP link is an IP tunnel. It should support ECN. When the Trill campus supports ECN, the Trill over IP header should be ECN marked based on ECN marking in the Trill header of the packet being transported. There's pictures for this, so you don't have to just get this the first time. Packet being transported with IP. If ECN is not supported in the Trill campus, it does not seem worthwhile to dig past the Trill layer to get ECN from and to the inner IP traffic. So we're going to propose this. Next slide. If you've got an R bridge and some IP routers, because this is your tunnel, the green line, to another R bridge, so you're running Trill over IP in this middle green line, right? And over here on the sending R bridge, the ingress of the tunnel for this particular packet, you have a link header and a Trill header, and that Trill header has an ECN mark in it and payload. Then we will copy the ECN mark from that Trill header into the outer IP header so that ECN can be tracked across the tunnel. And then we will combine them back into the Trill header ECN mark. Okay? Because while it's passing through the IP routers, if there's congestion, they're not going to put the ECN mark in the Trill header. To them, that's just payload. They're going to put it in the IP header, the outer IP header, right? So we want to recombine them so that if either of them is showing congestion, we show congestion. Okay? That way, the further traffic can act on, you know, the destination, whatever in the other side of the Trill campus can act on that congestion. Now, next slide. If the original R bridge is doing Trill, and inside the Trill header, the IP header has ECN marks, and the ECN mark can just be I support ECN, or it can be that there is congestion. I don't remember what the two codes are for that, but there are actually 3 codes. 2 of them are I support ECN, and one of them is there's congestion. But that's just for historical reasons. If the IP payload there has an ECN mark, okay, we never parse into that IP payload. There, like some of the hardware that supports Trill doesn't like look at that IP payload at all to decide what to do with this packet. It's looking at the Trill header. So we're proposing, and we will see if this is acceptable, that in that case, we would not take that inner ECN mark and copy it into the outer IP header, and then copy it back into the payload when we get to the other side, because we suspect that that's going to be a very costly thing to do for Trill hardware, and we don't think it's going to be worth doing. Like it might be one of those cases where you write a spec that says to do something and nobody does it, right? And so we need to talk to the transport area and see if they can live with that level of support for ECN.
I talked about
And he said it was okay? So probably it'll be okay because Bob Briscoe's the one who wrote RFC 6040 or whatever it was. So, so anyway, so that's our proposed fix for ECN. I think we'd like probably to know if anybody here has any particularly strong thoughts about that one way or the other.
Anyone else? Seniors who want any questions? Do people understand the issue? Is it on? Okay, now you can hear me? Better, okay. Does everyone, guys, this is a real interactive because we're trying to get the specs through. Does anybody have questions about the problem? Okay, any, please go.
Ramkumar, Brooked. Does this not apply to control plane frames? They are not.
I'm sorry, could you speak into the mic? There's much more noise than you would think right here. And so if you don't speak into the mic, I can't hear you.
So for the case where.
Into the mic.
Okay. For the case where you have Trill control plane frames, right? This does not apply or?
No.
the Trill control plane is the ISIS stuff. That's all one hop stuff. It doesn't apply.
So any other comments or questions on this particular topic? Okay. Next slide. Quality of service. Trill uses, well, primarily uses a 3-bit priority field for quality of service. There's also a 1-bit drop eligibility indicator. IP uses a 6-bit DSCP field. This is a differentiated services code point, I think. I don't like to use acronyms without saying what they are. Trill over IP provides a mapping from Trill QoS, so the sort of 4 bits, to the DSCP bit. But that mapping needs to be reviewed based on the latest RFCs. Apparently, we may not have gotten it entirely right based on the latest RFCs, or maybe we've been overtaken by events.
Yeah, they're coming up with a new DSCP explicitly for low effort service, which might be appropriate in one case. So,
Okay. But also we need to say in our draft, now this is one of these things I sometimes object to in the IETF actually. We're going to say in a draft that no one who is running this service is likely to read, that they should be aware that if they use Trill over IP, the actual QoS they get over the internet may be different than the kind of QoS they get over Trill. But we will say that because people want us to, and typing the sentence takes less time than arguing with them.
Oh yeah, sometimes things that seem obvious to us are not as obvious to the readers of the documents. After you've been, just when I first took electrical engineering, electric magnetism stuff, my TA claimed that if you just looked at the charge distribution, you could totally see what the field lines were. And by the end of the class we got there, I think there's a lot of IETF work like that, where we think all of the implications are obvious.
Yeah, but the thing is, the person who's going to be reading our spec is the one who is implementing the bit mapping, all right? And they should not get confused by this sentence. They should do what we said, okay? The problem is in operations, right? In operations, if you do use Trill over IP, depending on how your routers, that we don't even know the brand of, interpret DSCP code points, you may get different quality of service than you expect because...
Well, yeah, I think the problem is that some providers interpret them differently.
Right.
And we do say that you have to be able to configure this,
Mhm.
giving you a hint that if that's your problem, maybe what you want to do is configure the mapping to be different from what we give as the default. But the other problem is that if you go through multiple providers, kudos.
But we will say that in the spec because
I appreciate that.
because
Thank you.
we're good doobies.
Yes.
It will make the spec longer and not better, but it will not hurt the spec. So we will say it in the spec. In the case of transport, in the case of transport using TCP, so that case where Trill over IP is using TCP, so it's Trill over TCP over IP, a separate TCP connection per provided QoS level is needed in order for the QoS to work. This is because a typical one connection is going to be cached with the QoS that it first presents with. And so if you don't do separate connections for the separate QoS values, all the traffic will get, if you put it all in one TCP connection, will get the same QoS, and it will be whichever one the router first happened to notice and associate with this flow, which is not what you want. Is that a,
Yeah.
That's about it to say on this. So next slide. TCP transport. We offer the TCP transport as one of the format options. They said that they would prefer that we call it a transport when we run it in TCP instead of an encapsulation, since there's no one-to-one mapping between Trill packets and TCP packets. And that is very interesting because they demanded in Banana that I call it an encapsulation when we put it in MPTCP, because we aren't the transport, MPTCP is.
Well,
So, but it's,
this particular point is actually not from the transport area review. This is from Joe Touch.
well, Joe and Maria probably ought to talk to each other, but we will call it a transport and not an encapsulation, because it's not actually each packet, each Trill packet isn't encapsulated in one TCP packet. That isn't how it works. TCP is flow-based, and so there won't be a one-to-one mapping. And so he is correct, it is not properly an encapsulation. We will,
Yeah, just, oh,
I need a third word for this because I need it for Banana, so if anyone has one, please see me later. We add framing with the length field so that the incoming TCP packets can be parsed and reassembled if necessary to back to the original Trill packets. And you have to do this over TCP because TCP does not provide any packetization. So 3/4 of your packet might be in one TCP packet, the other quarter and the first half of the next one might be in the next TCP packet. And so if you don't put in some kind of length or delineator, or demarcation, you don't know where your original packet started and stopped. So we will do that. And there are apparently some things we can do to achieve better performance, and we will take those under advisement and try to see what we should put in the draft about that. So, as I just said, when a TCP is used, a Trill packet can be split across multiple TCP packets. Thus, the MTUs end up being less than the campus-wide minimum MTU. And so we need MTU discovery to extend down to a smaller configurable limit when you're using Trill over TCP over IP. Right.
how does that interact with MTU?
I'm not sure. Donald, do you want to?
We have this MTU thing, and if you're doing UDP or other things, then you really the campus-wide minimum MTU is due to in fact you want to be sure that your link state packets get through, or else ISIS won't work.
Yes.
Okay, but the problem is if you have a TCP link, at least in principle, everything, and you've configured it to encapsulate everything in TCP, then even your control plane packets over that one link can be chopped up into smaller TCP packets. So if that link, for some reason, let's say it's sort of a 1500 byte MTU link, but there's a bunch of other encapsulation that occurs in the middle of the link.
Yeah.
So it really pushes you down to 1300 or 1200. Right. Then you can still get everything over it. So it's in fact useful to know if the MTU on this link to Trill appears to be 1000 bytes. That's still a useful link if you're using TCP.
Right.
Because you can so the current we need to
we need some wording about that.
Stuff.
We'll probably still keep sort of the MTU for the reassembled Trill packet the
Yes.
same as it is now.
Right.
the causality in what we say here and what we said, what you just said is, could be turned around, right? It could be that if you have a lower MTU link between your sites, you should encapsulate in TCP because they'll be reassembled into the full-size packets and you don't have to.
If you don't, it won't
Right.
work.
Right. So, but I mean, it would allow us to support lower MTU links, right? So next, fragmentation. We shouldn't have any. There are a lot of reasons why fragmentation is bad. They include middle boxes where there's state and they don't always make sure that the two fragments, sometimes they're blocked. Sometimes you get issues where the two fragments don't take the same path. There can be a lot of problems with fragmentation in the network. They're also less efficient. You can get into these silly packets where if your MTU is like 5 larger than will fit, every time you do something, you get a full-size packet and a 5-byte packet, and so they're inefficient. Within a data center, use of UDP with fragmentation is generally consistent with a Trill philosophy of mostly worrying about the routing messages and not worrying about the lower layer messages. But TCP is actually a better way to avoid fragmentation on lower MTU links. And it also will then allow the fragments, like that we're going to reassemble into full Trill packets to get through NATs and firewalls. Next. NAT. Well, you need to use static bindings for NAT. And we need to write up what you have to do in order to get Trill to work over NAT. Neighbor R-bridge addresses, as reported in the source IP addresses, need to be mapped using the static binding into actual remote IP addresses before being listed in the ISIS neighbor TLV. So basically, we can't count on a NAT having an ALG for Trill where it would translate these inner addresses. We need to make sure we're using the correct inner addresses across a NAT. We generally need keep alive messages, which we haven't needed, in order to make sure that the NAT state stays active if there's a long interval between Trill packets. We also see fragmentation. And there's an interaction with security as well, which is that IPsec ESP packets need to be encapsulated in UDP IP to go through a NAT.
Okay, this is the point. Up until now, it sounds like it's just been readjusting wording. This sounds like, if I'm listening, that
There is an IPsec and UDP RFC, so we just have to cite that.
Okay, so it isn't, is it adding new technology to the draft, or is it just citing stuff that's already there? Or is it both?
Well, I mean, there's going to have to be, I wouldn't say it's new technology, but it is going to change implementations because there's going to be a question as to whether they get configured to be NAT compatible or not, or do they all run NAT compatible? We have to define these keep alive messages and say how often to send them, right? I don't know.
On this one, did the transport director?
She's asking that you use the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. John, I'm sorry I missed this. Can you hear me now? Okay. I apologize, John. My question here is, this sounds like this may take more work.
I mean, I do think there's going to be some work, but I don't think it's work. I think it's well understood work. Like, I think it's citing RFCs. It would change implementations, but I don't think it's going to be a lot of spec work.
I mean, as you can tell, there's actually quite a few things here, but each one of them is all pretty straightforward. So there's a significant amount of work to get to our milestone, but it's always a judgment call as to whether, for example, we need another working group last call or a short working group last call or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably. Okay.
Yeah. There's I mean, I suppose there's a possibility of saying something like, it doesn't work over NAT, But that probably is not what we want to say, because if we want to be able to do like the remote office scenario, those might be behind a DSL link with an app, right? I mean, so probably we want to support it working over NATs.
Oh, yeah, I guess question is, I agree with you on that, but my question is, what are the actual deployment scenarios that folks are envisioning, and do they have a need for it? Because this does add complexity.
Right, in the IP backbone scenario, we could say that there can't be a NAT, right? I mean, because you completely control that, right? If you've got 5 buildings on a campus and you want to connect them with an IP backbone, you decide whether or not there's a NAT on your campus. I think it's a remote office scenario that we would need to support NATs, and I don't have any real visibility into how much of the interest in Trill over IP is one or the other. Do you, Donald?
I mean, and that's most common for V4, right? So if you have a fair amount, depending on how much V6 your home networks are using and so on.
In the current draft, we do talk a little bit about fragmentation and recommend using V6 because V6 fragments are more robust. If you're going to end up with fragmentation, it's even worse to have flaky fragments.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess my perspective would be really good to get feedback on the mailing list as to whether the NAT use case is critical for folks who are looking at deployment or implementation, if that's something that they're targeting, or if the focus is more on V6 networks and such where NAT is not an issue.
Do we know if common DSL providers actually provide unnatted IPv6?
Offhand at this time in IETF, no. But I assume it also depends on.
I could ask around, and if we find that because it's DSL where you're, stuck with an app because it's actually done by the operator. And so I could ask around and see if DSL providers are natting IPv6 or not, right? And if not, we could say our answer to NAT in the remote office space is if your IPv4 service is natted, use IPv6.
Right. I guess part of my question was also geographical. So, my understanding of where a lot of the regions where Trill is more deployed tend to be a little more V6 centric, and we'll see that over time. And certainly we're focusing more towards V6.
Yeah. But I think at least we could at least ask like some of the BBF guys or whatever, if this is something we even have to worry about in V6.
Yeah, I'm trying for feedback.
Yeah. So next, any other feedback, questions, comments, anything?
Just to summarize for the chair, I'd like you to ask on the list for feedback on the deployment scenarios. Will you do that? Okay. If you do that today, maybe we'll get some feedback within a week or so.
Okay. Just specifically with regard to NAT, or which scenarios they're using, or?
Just ask if the NAT scenario is
Okay.
necessary in any of their deployment scenarios, then give an example of the campus scenario and the remote office scenario, and try to be as explicit as possible so we can get a clear definition to know whether we're going to spend time on this. If I sound like a broken record, we're going to get these drafts through. I'm known to be very focused.
Some of this is T crossing and I dotting. Some of it is like the ECN is a spec change, but it's like to comply with an IETF thing. This NAT one is the biggest change that is possibly useless. So let's make sure it's useful before we do it.
Yep.
So does anybody who hasn't signed the blue sheets other than Olga? Okay, so hopefully this will be a really short presentation, a simple feature, especially since we're winding down the activity in the working group. This provides an escape channel whereby vendors can define their own control messages. It uses the Arbridge channel facility, which is a way you can send control messages between Arbridges or between end stations and an R bridge that's they're both on the same link. And there's an RFC specifying how it works and everything. And there's a couple examples on this slide that do make use of it. So this is what they look like. There's an ether type that identifies the R bridge channel message, and then there's like a channel protocol number. It's like a sub protocol within R bridge channel, and that is what specifies what the channel protocol specific data is. You could have anything over there. So the idea is very simply to let vendors extend this by providing a way for them to define their own messages, and they can send their own control messages as they desire. The vendors could do this in other ways, and if our bridges all have IP addresses or MAC addresses or something, that you can imagine other ways, those are actually not required. And in principle, an R bridge could have only a nickname. It could have all PPP ports. So it has no MAC addresses. Not very likely, but could be. So anyway, this provides a sort of a universal method that's guaranteed to be able to communicate to an R bridge based on the nickname, or you can also send multicast to a data label scope set. So the idea is you basically pick a vendor channel, IETF picks a vendor channel, and in what was the data protocol specific thing, we put a little vendor channel header, and there's could be an organizationally unique identifier or a company ID. IEEE now sells company IDs cheaper than OUIs, because OUI reserves a whole block of MAC addresses, and it's 24 bits. A CID is 48 bits, but so it's much cheaper and doesn't give you any MAC addresses. So it should be really sort of a simple format thing, and this gives this facility to vendors. Actually, everything after the OUI or CID is really completely under the control of the vendor, but there's actually an expired draft on this which has a recommended vendor subprotocol and version for that subprotocol for the vendor, and an easy way to report errors. And this seems like a good idea. You certainly don't want to have vendors have to use up multiple OUIs just because they want multiple vendor channel protocols. They really should have a sub-protocol identifier underneath their OUI or whatever. So this draft will be revived very shortly, and then we could do a call for adoption, maybe based on a little discussion on the mailing list. So that's a simple thing. Any questions or comments?
Donald?
Yep.
After you revise the draft, will you make sure to, in the after it goes to the automatic announcement, will you provide to the list a description where, summation of this description where it'll be used and how it's happening so that people can make a good decision, and we'll call for adoption then?
Sure. The only change from the existing expired draft is to add the facility where you can use a company identifier in the place of an OUI, in case you're not a hardware Ethernet manufacturer and you don't need an OUI.
Right. That's all I'm asking is when you adopt it, remind people that that's the point, and then we'll go back and ask that question. I'm trying to emphasize how we're going to make progress quickly.
Okay.
Okay, now comes one of the really good ones. Margaret, thank you. Izan, you're on the ARP optimization.
This is usually I'm going to talk about this ARP and the optimization, the comments we received from the AD review, area directory review and AD review. So it has been quite a long time already. So we have some outstanding comments from the Gen Art review and the ops and the securities. I'm going to look at them one by one. Next page. So the Gen Art review, it's a fairly lengthy review, but most of them are editorial and clarification. There is one thing which is a real disagreement, is the reviewer thinks there is something which is X,
let me try to remember what is X. X actually is a
Send
send
keying.
thing, right?
Send keys to the R bridge. Keys for
Yeah.
send.
Yeah. Because we suggested to use the, now we suggest we say the send can be used. So it talks about how if it is used, how we are going to exchange the key from the end station to the edge R bridge. So it's we use the word we use the word, this mechanism is out of scope in our document, but the reviewer thinks that implies that some mechanism of this to do the key exchange must be existed. But the author think the saying that something is out of scope for a document doesn't imply anything about whether this mechanism exists or does not exist. So that's the one disagreement. So what we are going to do, I think we are going to feedback to the reviewer our opinion. You might try just a like a wording change, like say how to do this is unspecified,
Okay.
and see if they think that is good. Do you? I mean,
Well,
sometimes
try.
something like that can solve the problem. And
Yeah, great. That sounds very reasonable. Next slide. Okay. The ops director.
Just one suggestion. If you really get stuck against that, Donald, I think I'd ask Kalia to
Yeah.
aid.
Yeah, there was just this, not to mention names, but Dan Worley in his Gen Art review said that when we said X is out of scope, that he thought that implied to the reader that there was a mechanism to do X. It didn't seem like a second.
Aaliyah Atlas. So the issue with this document is the concern about the security considerations, and that is what there is to discuss on. Of course, we always really greatly appreciate the reviews and comments that are received during the directorate, but it is up to the area directors who have those directorates to decide whether or not they are discuss-worthy. That is not discuss-worthy and is not blocking. Thank you.
In other words, the chair says if it's really, if you feel more comfortable with the original words, leave it. Is that a little bit more blunt? We're trying to get a lot of drafts through. I'm going to get blunt and directive. I apologize ahead of time. You always may disagree with me and do something else, but I'm just trying to help.
Okay, I will see you. Okay. So this talks about the ops review. So basically there are two parts from them. The first one is talking about the operational considerations, and the second one is management considerations. So from the operational point of view, network impact of failure to optimize should be no worse than the existing case without optimization. This is, I guess, what we have done is let me see. Right. I think from this document we have already specified this in the document, right? It's no worse than the without optimization. So this it should be okay. So then for the statistical counter, both from the operational and the management view, they talks about the statistical counters. I guess so. For this one, we think we can. Actually, it's up to the implementation, because it's not really the statistical counter is try to remember. Okay, for example, how many ARP or address requests have been received, something like that. But it's really up to the implementation. But we can add some text to give more clearer description on this. And okay, move on to the management. It talks about the YAM model, how to configure between different policies should be covered, because okay, this talks about because we can use different policies, for example, whether to reply based on the local cache or or let the address request passing to the real destination in order to do the double confirmation. So there are different policies. So this comment basically says whether, okay, ideally as a YAM model.
We have a Yang model, and based on the fact we have to revise the Yang model for the revised data stores, leave it to the Yang, just say our Yang model revisions will consider it. Go on.
Oh yeah, Atlas. The Opster review said ready with nits. None of these were discuss worthy. It's lovely to put some breadcrumb trails into the Yang model. Thank you.
Yes, and you don't have to put that in the document. You can just respond to the review that way. We're being real blunt with these guys. No, you don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Okay.
It's always good to collaborate.
It's always good to collaborate, but we're trying to get the docs done.
Okay.
This is the discuss.
Okay. That sounds good to me. The last one, okay, the last is the security from security. It suggests you need a clearer comparison of using or not using the optimizations. So what we are thinking is generally this. Okay, we do not think we impose anything worse or better by using the optimization from this. Actually, unless we are using a very reliable directory to push and pull all the address mappings. Otherwise, we don't have any change to current security considerations. So probably, I guess we just give some text explain what's our standpoint for this, right?
Okay, Aaliyah, could you give us some wisdom? And this is the one thing we really have to talk about as a group, so need your help, guys. Can you tell us what the AD was really wanting on this? Do you know what Eric's mind is? This came from Eric Rescolin, yeah. And Donald, if you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's further points here, and in general, some of his points, which we put on the next slide, actually, it seemed like he was asking for a thorough threat analysis of layer 2 security, which I'm not sure we need to do. Like he says, what if the attacker creates a fake DHCP server? Well, yeah, sure, that things get screwed up unless you know. I mean, we're not trying to solve the problem of fake DHCP servers. To the extent that it should be, I mean, it's not our job. Maybe it doesn't cover it very well. That's
Yes. I think we should talk offline and have do a reference to that and so on. I will, I have not talked to Eric about this yet. If that looks like it would be productive, I can certainly do so, but I would like to have more in hand on which aspects and how they're being addressed before doing so.
Yeah, we should go through one round of direct author interaction with them and see what, maybe it'll evaporate. And we'll see.
Yes.
Donald, would you lead that one?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, the next is about duplicate IP address. So let me see. Yeah, handle it. Yeah, basically what we're thinking is unless we have a very complete reliable directory, then we are very sure. Okay, this to authorize this IP address should be used by which one. Otherwise, there is no much thing we can do because the duplicate address. I mean, with the conventional ARP and ND, this is the case, but we don't do anything worse than that. So unless we have this reliable directory, then we should trust it. Otherwise, we get nothing to do with it. That's my thought. Anything you want to add, Donald?
No.
Okay, the last one.
There's
Okay.
one more slide.
Oh, there one most likely. Logging the duplicate address. Okay, this is to suggest whenever there is a duplicate address being detected, probably we need to do the logging. But I kind of thing is still implementation specific, but we'll add the text to say, okay, this is recommended. Okay, next slide. I guess this is the,
Yeah, we already talked about that.
yeah, we have talked about the fake DHCP server. Yeah, that's all, I guess. Yeah, so currently the status is publication requested. Resolve some comments, but we have some, I guess, from two reviews. We're going to resolve them. When we resolve them and the ADs have signed off, then we hope it will be released to IFC editor. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
We're through with the scheduled items, yes. We have the animals.
Yes.
Or anything else you want.
Oh, that'll take 2 minutes, and then we need to have a, then if you can put up the notes you sent to them, right, just gives that.
Okay.
We're in 20 minutes, so I'm trying to get through it. I may miss this section in a minute, so. Okay,
Well, okay.
okay, that was a few. Okay, thank you.
This is a very short, do you have the,
I haven't. This is all what I had on my machine, so I didn't need to go down.
oh, just from the top, okay. This is what I mentioned before. And all the Yang models that haven't gone through the ISG are being requested to do the revised data store models for Yang. I need the input I mentioned earlier in order to go on. Did you find it? Okay. Yeah, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Just go down. It's just one slide. It was real quick.
Okay.
This is my funny joke for the thing. This is the pre-NDMA and the end config, and that's how long the debate came. I thought it was a cute picture. It's a Dr. Seuss if you're a US person, and we think it's resolving. Actually, the revised data store, why the network management, I don't know what NMDA stands for, but it's something. But the revised data store draft is actually, looks like it's doing well and about completed. It's got some more nits. But the recommendation is that everything that goes before it, can we click or, okay,
I was going to go at full speed, but it's.
just go ahead and change it.
It's not to me because it's in the browser, so.
That's okay. It's only one more thing. We'll live with uncleanness.
Okay.
I'm more interested in talking about Fenway stuff. I just need to tell you that these are all pre-revised drafts. The connectionless draft is actually making progress through the line. So I've got to find out from Deepak whether he wants the Trill OEM to go through the connectionless stuff, which is how it is Jim through line, he's still doing the line. Oh, I'm sorry. Don, I'm sorry, John. Let me go through this again for you guys there. All the Yang models are being revised because the Yang model structure is changing to what's called a revised data store. Unfortunately, it's I2S, another one of the working groups I chair, that caused that by adding dynamic data stores. Didn't cause it? Okay. You want to tell me want to correct me there?
Sure. Yeah, no, it wasn't that. It's the issue of operational and intended state versus
Right.
configuration. Onto the point of, for the Yang, I would add a third option to what you have, just to jump ahead
Yes.
slightly, which is to take what's implemented and, do the presentation layer transformation to the data store and then have what's actually implemented as an appendix in the same RFC.
Yes. And we can do that. Those are the three options, or actually two options, two separate RFCs, one RFC. The only thing that I have to include there is, Isa, if anyone's done the line OEM stuff in Huawei, if you just check, you don't have to find out now,
The line?
The Lime, that's TISA's OEM that went from us to Lime, and then where they have the centralized.
Yeah, Lime was a working group.
Yeah, I know that.
you said you're asking whether there's any person done do the Lime EM model in IETF or
Yeah,
in the
the-
product.
What product?
Personally, I don't think so, but
Okay,
I could check. Yeah.
if you just double check. I'll assume not. Okay, and does anybody have any feeling? No feeling is fine. We'll just do what's right. Okay, I see no strong feeling jumping up. Okay, Donald, will you bring up FemWays? I think we've got just enough time to talk about the smart endnotes problem. Okay, can you blow it up at all?
Oh, yes.
Oh, how wonderful.
That's good enough.
Can you s-
Can you
No.
see it?
Let's see, this is the internet stuff.
Okay, that's good. Probably 100, yeah. Okay. Take a moment to read it. There you go. Sorry, the reading's hard there. So it's just talking about snooping. You see where it says that? I may read faster than you, I apologize. Okay, comment.
Yeah, this is Fang Wei from ZT. So I will. So I'm sorry that I didn't notice these comments before.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
This morning,
very
it's not
recent.
your fault.
No, it's,
So I will try to analyze these comments and update the draft based on the.
yeah, I'd be happy to
So
interact with you.
I'm sorry that some of the things some of the I did. I'm sorry that I forget some of the details. So I will try to analyze
fine.
the
That's fine.
the document
Good
later.
answer.
Excuse me, that's a very good answer. Please check, be careful.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can send you some suggested text and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I basically commented on the smart end nodes and the directory and system cap drafts. So, anyway, and there's some editorial suggested changes too. That's the main talk to make sure the technical stuff is clean. So is that
Okay,
kind of
go
most
back.
of it? Oh,
Uh,
you want to go back to the?
This is the wrap up. If you go back to the document status for me, Donald.
Sure. Well, want to go through them all or just?
I think those are all taken care of. I think we've done end nodes. Okay. Again, my whole focus here is to get your drafts out and into, my intent is to send all of these to working group last fall. Is there anyone that you feel, I mean, other than the Trill OEM, because I have to deal with the revised data stores, and I'm not intending to send Trill PCI. For all the rest, is there any problem with these drafts that you foresee? Because otherwise we'll start working group last falls immediately. This is specifically multi-level nicknames.
So this is the Fang Wei again. I know that the 9 work group and I have wrote a draft about a BLOM young data model. This is based on the nine structure. So I can review the young OM, the Trill OM young data model. Data.
Okay, so it's a model?
Yeah. Oh, young.
Did you say, have you reviewed it or have you done anything in? If you could at least send me a rough draft and also we feel comfortable sending the list.
Okay, I will send some.
That would be very
Yes.
Minghui and Izao, Donald, multi-level, anything you see that's a problem before we go to working group last call? Otherwise, I
Well,
think
one of the purposes of working group last call is to give people, sort of a chance to review it again, and we might find something, but I think
Sure.
it's, yeah,
but I'm asking, nobody sees any problems to go?
I'm not aware of any right now.
I'm not aware of anybody. Okay, these are all going to go to working group last call. Okay,
I
probably.
think there may be some outstanding unresolved comments on transport over MPLS.
Okay, if you check that, but guys, this will go, I will probably start sending it out tonight. I'm not waiting for any of this, okay? We'll get all this through. Any other questions about any of the drafts or any things we're trying to complete? Okay. And your adoption call will go out once I get online again. I just want to,
Well, it would be announcement that it has been adopted.
yes, it will be the announcement that it has been adopted. All the drafts that we mentioned go down to the adoption drafts, so I can
That's,
say that again.
Sorry, those two were.
These two are adopted. Because we're in a different type of season of just getting everything done, I wanted to make sure you, Donald, and the working group knew that this has got to go fast. As long as there's no objection, all these things will go to working group last call. If you've been a drill draft, and all the adoption stuff will go in. I will do a personal review, and then I will ask to go to working group last call. This is a different season. Okay? Please respond. Your same great response. I'll ask you a question. I'll ask you things about the document. I'll ask you things about deployment. You've been doing great about responding. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Well, I'll return the rest of the day to you. Enjoy. Did I miss anything, Aaliyah?
The speed of the IETF and the working group is how fast you respond. This stuff goes if you time it, and we're trying to make it go very fast.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I great you could write it.
Well, these will all be adopted. I just need to verify that it's okay. But we got the necessary support for the base data stuff. I needed people to engage in the data store.
I heard guys, and I.
Oh, the ephemeral stuff, yeah.
Like I said, it wasn't, it's not right. Right, I was just need them to.
It's gonna continue. So, we needed to complete our milestone before we took any drafts. The ephemeral, text took joint editing for maybe 2 hours, and then it's done. It was, the revised data, and more of what we did is we talked to the revised data store guys and said, we need this, no. So the data store thing is that big, basically, but I have some others. I have one question I have to find out from someone else, which is how no, actually the answer. I'm waiting for one piece of write-up from Kim, and then I'll open about the ephemeral state out as